There's just so many little things in Modern Warfare that we now take for granted.
Easy, lad. There's too many of them. Let them go. Keep a low profile and hold your fire.
COD 4 is easily the best.
Target reset. Clear to engage all of those. Yeah, direct hits right there.
Nazi Zombies was a cult hit. People began playing it as religiously as they were the multiplayer campaign.
But was there something special within Modern Warfare 2 that the other games didn't capitalize on?
No one builds a frantic roller coaster of a shooter better than Call of Duty.
The gameplay of the single-player campaign bored me. It feels like the rest of the Call of Duty games.
I've come to the verdict that this game is garbage.
Why is Call of Duty Ghosts, at least, such a bad game?
This game is the biggest pile of dog poop ever.
I really just don't even like it anymore, and I don't know, it seems like that might be a general consensus now.
What don't you like about Call of Duty Ghosts?
Everything is just terrible.
It's 2010, Friday afternoon in your school courtyard to be specific. You've just drudged through a whole week and you know that you won't be able to see your mates until next Monday, but that's not such a bad thing. Because mum is on her way to pick you up and you know that at home there's 3 specific things that await you. 3 things being the difference between good and evil. 3 things that separate the boys from the men. 3 things that at the time were indistinguishable from God. A 1.25 litre bottle of fridge cooled vanilla Coke, an Xbox 360 with a fresh 12 months of membership, and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. After arriving home, you pour yourself a glass of that sweet, bubbly black poison while also firing up your Xbox and selecting the greatest Call of Duty to ever be released. You'd prefer to play Team Deathmatch because the players are generally less skilled in that game mode, but the games aren't long enough to get one of your selected kill streaks, the tactical nuke, so instead you load into Domination.
Yeah, I deep-throated your mom.
You come to discover that the other team is so bad that differentiating them from 8-year-old children would be merely impossible, partly because many of them are 8-year-old children. You sit behind the spawn and slaughter them until the cows come home. Only in this scenario, the cows are that golden 25 kill streak that you could only receive once in a very small quantity of games. You call it in, sit back in your chair, take a swig of that vanilla Coke with ice in it, and you think to yourself, does it really get any better than this? Well, unbeknownst to you at the time, that game that you had grown to know and love, that game that you thought would be superior overall until the end of time, that game where you had made many friends, enemies, and memories, would at some point begin to decline in popularity. Only 3 short years later, in late 2012, Call of Duty Black Ops would mark the final Call of Duty in the reign of the series, before the sales and player base would begin to decline, like the unsinkable Titanic hitting an iceberg and ending up at the bottom of the ocean. This creates a question that back in 2010 would have never even entered your frame of mind. What caused the downfall of the Call of Duty series? Was it the fact that after 15 years of development, the player base simply lost interest? Was it the fact that the quality of the gameplay rapidly declined following the release of Black Ops 2? Or was it something a little more sinister, such as the slow undermining of the skill gap, one of the elements that made the game so enjoyable in the first place? This is the rise and fall of one of the greatest video game series of all time, Call of Duty. But before we get into the core of today's video, I'd just like to take a second to thank today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is a turn-based RPG, where you have the opportunity to create a team of champions to battle both bosses and other players while simultaneously completing challenges. The game is 100% free to play, easy to download, and can be played on both iOS and Android devices. What I did personally when I first started playing Raid Shadow Legends was to play through the campaign while completing quests and challenges at the same time. And if you don't want to go on a solo mission, you can join one of the clans available in the game, a great way to learn from others. My favourite part about Raid Shadow Legends is how many different champions there are, and they all have different and unique attacks. On top of all this, Raid just released the new Artifact Forge, a fantastic time saver which provides the ability to craft artifacts directly. A new advanced quest system, new champions, and even a new Doom Tower being developed as we speak are 3 aspects undoubtedly worth getting hyped over, so what are you waiting for? Go to the video description, click on the special links, and if you're a new player, you'll get 100,000 silver, 50 gems, 10 mystery shards, and a free champion called Slasher. You can find all of the new rewards here on the home screen. Good luck, and I'll see you there. There's something very alluring, seductive, and almost romantic about World War II, isn't there? The black and white film representing a bygone era, the unthinkable atrocities forcing us to come to terms with what humans are truly capable of. Perhaps we just like to put ourselves in the position of those who are really involved, asking ourselves, what would we do if we were put in such a situation? Well, thanks to the invention of film, story, and specifically video games, we've actually had somewhat of an opportunity to answer that question. Beginning back in the early 2000s, game developers began to realize that it was possible to put any old schmuck in the shoes of a World War II hero without the player having to leave their mum's basement. Following such a discovery, World War II shooter games such as Medal of Honor,
pay attention, and you might even stand a chance on the battlefield,
Wolfenstein, and Battlefield began to flood the gaming market to such a level that if the Noah's Ark story was written in the early 2000s, the flood archetype would have just been replaced with World War II games. However, it wasn't just these three big titles fighting for a share in the shooting genre. There was one more game that we're yet to discuss which was also thrown into the mix. We're talking about a game that was released with such limited experience by its small development team at Infinity Ward that throwing it into the gaming market was like throwing a rat into a snake enclosure with the hope of it surviving. However, we might as well call this game Ratatouille, or that mouse from Mouse Hunt, because over the course of its life it did nothing besides evade and overcome its predators in the gaming genre, coming out on top as the most iconic first-person shooter game of all time. We're of course talking about Call of Duty, beginning with the first installment of the game, Call of Duty 1. Call of Duty 1 was released in October 2003 with the overall goal of, as previously discussed, giving players an opportunity to become a soldier in World War II. The game featured a basic campaign, basic multiplayer, basic gun selection, and a basic storyline. In fact, everything in Call of Duty 1 was so basic that if it was a white girl, it probably would have had an option on the homepage to order Starbucks via Uber Eats. But we have to remember, this was 2003, and while the game was basic and somewhat similar to the other titles released at the time, it was still slightly better than many of its competitors.
It does things that you may have seen before in other World War II themed first-person shooters, but it does them by and large as good as or better than other games before.
But while the game was an impressive representation of what Infinity Ward was able to produce way back in 2003, there was still certainly improvements needed. Glitches, lack of overly gripping storyline, minimal gun choice in the original multiplayer.
These are the only classes and weapons you could use while playing the original Call of Duty game.
All elements leading to a fairly weak launch in many countries. On top of this, the game was brand new. No one even knew what Call of Duty was. Like a new YouTuber, a new business, or that one weird kid from your school who would walk around talking to himself, nobody cared about it. The game needed to build a reputation, and the only way the game could build that reputation would be to release new installments of the game while simultaneously improving on what was already created, which is exactly what the Call of Duty series decided to do with the release of Call of Duty 2 and 3. Both of these games, once again both based in World War II, were somewhat similar to the first game. However, it was clear that there were substantial improvements being made to the game. In-depth campaigns 3 times the length of the first Call of Duty, the regenerative health system, newly introduced multiplayer game modes, fans of the series being spoiled for choice like a 45-year-old construction worker looking at the lunchtime menu in a fish and chip shop. But more importantly, all of this displayed Call of Duty's ability to improve over time, perhaps giving its fans confidence in the possibility of what it might become in the future. And what it might become in the future was a notion only perceivable by the team of developers working on the next installment after Call of Duty 3. The installment that would really change the first-person shooter world. The installment that would begin the memories for many long-time fans of the genre. The installment that would take the game into the mainstream. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, a raw representation of what was truly capable in game development by the late 2000s. A mix of pace, emotion, and an unthinkable provision of badass content. It was like the developers had taken everything from the first 3 Call of Duty games, combined them together, pooped out a new game, and injected steroids into it.
Call of Duty 4 is consistently rated by the COD fanbase, the players, as the best Call of Duty so far.
An incredibly strong campaign full of memorable missions, unbelievable camaraderie between characters, and situations so realistically stressful that they might as well have renamed the mission We Need to Talk. Now it's worth noting that when the game was released, 2007, offline single player, mainly campaign mode, was still the main reason for purchasing a first-person shooter game. What do I mean by this? Well, 2007 was that period when everyone was still getting connected to the internet. You know, that kind of period when your dad coming home with a dial-up router was so exciting that it might as well have been Chris Brown doing a collab with the Black Eyed Peas on Christmas Day. Online multiplayer hadn't really taken off for many games or platforms platforms. I mean, for crying out loud, the PS3 had only just been released in early 2007. Online multiplayer was more of a specialized game mode for those lucky enough to be connected to the internet. But just like the individuals burdened with the responsibility of updating the software on Stephen Hawking's wheelchair, the developers of Call of Duty were smart. They saw something coming. Xbox Online, PlayStation Online, the release of Halo 3 Online in 2007. It was obvious that there was somewhat of a revolution happening here. Things were slowly being set up in a way to give players the ability to start playing online with their friends. The developers at Call of Duty both predicted and capitalized on this by releasing an extensive online multiplayer. Kill streaks, multiple maps, different game modes, leveling, prestiging, hell, even the ability to choose the color of the camo on your gun. So many different variables that an option to choose your penis size wouldn't have been much of a surprise to the fans of the series. Call of Duty 4 dropped a firestorm in any kind of online multiplayer that had been released previously by any game developer, presumably with the intention of picking up individuals getting console internet connection who might also be looking for a new online game to play. Well, their prediction ended up being almost 100% accurate, with reviews stating that the amazingly deep multiplayer rivals Halo 3 in terms of reach and scope. Then, to back it up, the release of Call of Duty 5 World at War, once again changing the game through the introduction of new multiplayer game modes. Now, the multiplayer in World at War went down in history with a reputation somewhat comparative to the Germans in World War II, both pretty goddamn awful. However, World at War became iconic following the release of a new unique game mode separate from the campaign and multiplayer. A game mode that in the beginning was somewhat of a meme, but a game mode all the same that would result in a drastic expansion of the Call of Duty player base. We're talking about Call of Duty Zombies. Similar to Call of Duty multiplayer in the beginning, Zombies was added in a very simplistic bare bones format with one initial small map and only a few unlockable areas, assumably to test whether or not players would actually enjoy it. Well, as it turns out, players loved the game mode, specifically for the high intensity gameplay as well as the ability to test and compete with others on how many rounds you could make it through. Following this discovery, 3 further maps were added and it was clear to the developers that the players would want more zombies in future installments of the game. However, before the developers could think about more zombies, they had to shift their focus onto the next Call of Duty that was set to be released in November 2009. And by this point, many fans didn't even think that the game could get any better. Extensive multiplayer in Call of Duty 4, zombies in Call of Duty 5, how much better could it get? Well, the answer to that question was so much better that you had to be wearing a helmet not to have your brain blown out of your head from a dopamine overload.
Oh my god!
Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. By this point, late 2009, playing multiplayer online games had become so mainstream that even your nan might have had her PS3 connected up to the internet. And most people were looking for good online multiplayer games to play with their friends. And Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 was so perfect for filling that gap that it was like Johnny Sins had just shown up to a Brazzers set. There was something purely magical about Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, but it was hard to describe. Maybe it was the customizable kill streaks, the introduction of multiple new gun attachments, or even the perfectly polished sniping aspect of the game. Regardless, one thing was for sure, the multiplayer was on a new level. After the first week, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 had sold 4 times as many copies as Call of Duty World at War. And if you look at the graph closely, you can see that there was a lot of growth coming towards the Call of Duty series in the near future. The release of Black Ops once again brought about another amazing multiplayer experience. Modern Warfare 3 closed down the Modern Warfare series perfectly while also adding further game-changing additions. Then Black Ops 2 took the zombies gameplay to a new level with the introduction of uniquely interactive maps. After the release of Black Ops 2, it became blatantly obvious as to why the series was so successful. The developers had this unrelenting motive to update the game in a way that always seemed to make it better than the previous installment, except sniping between Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops, that was just an absolute failure. But for everything else, that seemed to be the natural path of development. They understood what the player base wanted. They knew players enjoyed zombies, so they expanded on it. They knew players hated noob tubes and danger close, so they removed it. They knew the players loved kill streaks, so they expanded on it, perfectly curating the game over multiple installments to hit one serotonin-fueled peak during Black Ops 2. But perhaps unbeknownst to the developers, Black Ops 2 would be the final installment of the series before Call of Duty, as a whole, would begin to decline in popularity. The release of Call of Duty Ghosts, the beginning of the end. In 2003, the Call of Duty series had purchased a one-way ticket on the Dopamine Express, and unfortunately the train was nearing its final destination. The first week following Ghost release saw a 40% drop in sales from the high point during Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 2, down to being on par with the sales during Modern Warfare 2's first week back in 2009. And it's obvious as to why the sales weren't great. The game, as if it was Kirby giving a blowjob, kind of sucked.
Why is Call of Duty Ghosts, at least, such a bad game? I really just don't even like it anymore, and I don't know, it seems like that might be a general consensus now.
Players complaining that you die too quickly, so gunfights were non-existent. The maps were large, ugly, and poorly designed. The destructible maps didn't change the gameplay whatsoever. On top of all this, the developers replaced some of the game modes that had made the game so successful in the first place, such as Hardpoint, Demolition, and Capture the Flag, with Blitz, Crank, and Hunted, alienating some of the long-time fans as they didn't know what game mode to play.
What don't you like about Call of Duty Ghosts?
It's Call of Duty Ghosts.
Positive reviews of the game on YouTube by big-time review companies, for example IGN, received dislike ratios of sometimes 70%, with many people saying that the reviewers were just stating the game was good in order to gain approval from the developers, with proof being that some of the reviewers later went on to work at Activision. Almost every worst to best Call of Duty ranking list puts Ghost somewhere near the bottom, and Black Ops 2 somewhere near the top. So you might say that this contrast made it blatantly obvious as to why players began to lose confidence in the developers of Call of Duty, and this loss in confidence would only continue with the following release being Advanced Warfare, once again displaying fewer sales than Call of Duty Ghosts, also being put at the bottom of many lists when ranking Call of Duty games from best to worst. Then for the next Call of Duty, Black Ops 3, you have to put yourself in the position of a potential fan of the series. If Ghosts and Advanced Warfare were two of the worst Call of Duties to ever be released, is Black Ops 3 really gonna be any better? Unlikely. This mindset caused many fans to avoid the sequel to the famed game that they had once known and loved, Black Ops 2, like trying to avoid eye contact with an old friend out in public in the hope that they don't see you either. It was also around this point that players began to complain, like a 50-year-old mum requesting to speak to the manager after receiving the wrong sauce from McDonald's, of how the game had become purely pandered to newer players.
Call of Duty, it said low to no skill gap at all. I could put my 12-year-old cousin on Call of Duty, and he will get at least 5 kills.
Call of Duty started to squash any inequality between the teams in an attempt to give newer players a shot at getting the upper hand. Assists began to give the same points as kills, KD ratios removed, kill counts removed, point systems removed, skill-based matchmaking added. It was like Robin Hood had been hired on Call of Duty's development team to take from the skilled and give to the unskilled in an attempt to give casual players an opportunity to win without them having to invest any time into getting better at the game. By the time Modern Warfare had rolled around only last year, players were stating that Call of Duty had basically turned into a game with no real goal besides making sure that noobs get to win.
This Call of Duty is made for bad Call of Duty players.
Critics began to believe that Call of Duty was a gaming manifestation of real-world participation trophy culture, telling everybody that no matter how bad they were a winner and deserved something for doing nothing.
If not a game that hands out participation trophy kills, a game that has hindered players' growth by shielding them from adversity.
However, after making this project and my downfall of Fortnite, I think I've concluded that there's nothing that ruins a game faster than crushing the skill gap. Experienced players don't like it because their hard work suddenly means nothing, and new players don't even like it anyway, because putting the hard work in isn't even worth it, because becoming good at the game is no longer an achievement. The more difficult something is, the better it feels to come out successfully on the other side, and you don't get to remove the difficulty without simultaneously removing the fun. And while the recent release of Call of Duty Warzone has bumped up the skill gap as well as the popularity of the game, it seems to be somewhat mutually agreed upon that the multiplayer aspect of the series has been on long-term decline over the last 6 or 7 years, with many people claiming that it would be difficult, if not impossible, for it to ever come back to where it was in the past. So at this point, it only seems appropriate to present some explorable theories as to why Call of Duty has seen such a decline since its peak in 2013. The first theory I'd like to present is that people simply lost interest in the game due to the time and length of the series as a whole. Now this theory is somewhat difficult to prove or disprove, but I think it's safe to say that over a 13-year period between Call of Duty 4 and the current day, regardless of how many game-changing updates or improvements are implemented, players are going to get bored after playing for a long time simply because of the repetitiveness. There's only so many new maps, new attachments, new kill streaks, new guns, new leveling systems that you can implement before people realize, hey, this is pretty much the same as when it was first released. And this is just the typical path for almost every game. There's no such thing as a game that doesn't have a natural decline in interest as time progresses, except for maybe RuneScape, but honestly I don't know how it's kept the same player base for the last 15 years, but apart from that, Fortnite, Red Dead Redemption, Skyrim, the natural path is always a declining player base because the repetitiveness always ends up getting to the player. The second theory is that people began to stop playing the game due to the poor updates and content implemented by the developers after the release of Black Ops 2. Now this theory is a little more concrete, because there are so many objective accounts by people discussing very similar issues with the Call of Duty series series following the release of Ghosts. A community consensus all sharing the same negative opinion is probably the best piece of evidence for a decline in quality, as the developers began to remove and replace many of the aspects that made the game so popular in the first place. It was almost inevitable that players would perceive this as a decline in quality and begin to boycott the series. This was seen with Ghosts, then with Advanced Warfare, then Black Ops 3, etc. To finish this short point, I think it's safe to say, a decline in quality is always going to be closely followed by a decline in player base. The third, final, and my personal favourite theory is that the game began to decline as the skill gap was slowly being crushed over numerous installments. It seems as though the point when the series began to steer away from the extremely unbalanced gameplay also happened to be the same time when the game began to die, possibly as a result of so many people complaining about how overpowered certain aspects were. But ironically, looking back, you kind of realise that all of the points we used to complain about were actually the most fun, and if anything, the only real reason we continued to play the game. NoobTube, danger close, one-man army lobbing grenade launcher shots right into the enemy spawn on terminal, sitting behind a couch spawn trapping with an LMG in a 9v9 demolition on Nuketown 24/7, sitting in a chopper gun and just holding the right trigger on the enemy spawn, rendering the other team completely useless. Surprisingly, it seems as though the things we really hated ended up being the things that, without us realizing at the time, were keeping the game alive. Reduce the ability to completely dominate, and you surprisingly reduce the enjoyability of the game. The reality of Call of Duty's downfall is most likely a mix of all three components. Take an audience that's likely already been playing the game for around 3 to 6 years, reduce the quality of the gameplay, and make it unrewarding to advance as a player, and you've brewed up a situational beer so bad that even IGN reviewers might give it 0 out of 10 stars. The reality is that games come and go, rise and fall, go in and out of fashion. There's no such thing as a game that isn't a bubble. So with all of this being said, it's still incredibly impressive that the series, after 15 years of continual work, is still running with a reasonably strong player base. However, with that being said, I think it could be nearing the end for Call of Duty multiplayer. But that's a statement that can only be put to the test in the future installments of the Call of Duty series.